Hello everybody, my name is Ratnus, and welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week's affixes are Tyrannical, Bursting, Volcanic, and of course, Tormented. This is a classic push week combination of affixes, but next to Tyrannical instead of Fortified, which kind of continues a trend so far this season, where several of the weeks have been shuffled around so that particularly harsh affixes tend to happen next to Fortified, and favorable ones happen next to Tyrannical, which I think this season is going to mean that those two general types of week are going to be probably roughly equal in terms of how high keys you're going to see get done. And this is certainly a good week for pushing up fairly high keys. Volcanic, one of the lower impact affixes in most cases. A couple of exceptions, which we'll get to when we talk about the dungeons. And Bursting, an affix that can be challenging, especially for undergeared healers. And for groups that can't manage the bursting stacks, but generally less of a pain in this expansion than it has been in some previous ones. So all in all, pretty good week to go do and some keys. Let's get started going dungeon by dungeon. The other side, so if you're interested in any of my routes, by the way, they're available on Raider.io every week. I'll put a link in the description below to the page where you can find them. I have two routes for most dungeons, one with skips and one without. For most weeks, they're starting to look pretty similar week to week, although I have made some changes this week relative to last week, and always I'm looking out for changes to be made when there's affixes that really demand it. This week, a little bit less so anything like that. So in the other side, the basic plan that I advocate is swing around towards the car's side first, grab the Tormented powers, swing into the Mechagon area, grab the power, go out towards Ardenweld, grab the power, and then you've got your fourth power online pretty quick. This doesn't add too much backtracking to the dungeon. It adds an extra half a circle of running for the upside of getting access to your fourth anima power very early in the dungeon, right? You get your fourth anima power as the 13th of 31 pulls, so pretty early to get that online, and I think a useful way to go about doing this dungeon, so I definitely recommend doing this. One thing that higher end groups are starting to do in dungeons, including in this one, is skip Aura's Cold Heart and or skip, not Ruth, but Sagadon when it's easy to do so. Because those anima powers are among the weaker ones, which actually if you right click through, you can see which ones are dropped by each one. So you're missing out on Stone Ward, which is powerful when you don't kill Sagadon, but you're not really missing out on much when you don't kill Aurus, right? None of these powers are particularly compelling. So that is, I would say, the easiest one, if you're interested in starting to skip Tormented, is Aura's Cold Heart. That's the one I would do if you were in a group that wanted to do that. But I would say don't worry about that in almost all cases. Almost all groups, you'll have an easier time if you just kill the Tormented. But you are going to start seeing the push groups starting to skip, again, primarily Aurus and in some spots Sagadon. Okay, so that's the other side. The only difference between the two routes is the route with skips does a skip here, because this section is pretty annoying, but not a big deal. All right, let's do Halls of Atonement. Halls of Atonement, another fairly favorable dungeon this week. They have nerfed Echelon recently, although not in all the parts of the fight that are hard, but actually in some of the avoidable damage, so very scary encounter still, absolutely worth bloodlusting, I would say. I'd say Echelon is by far the most important bloodlust in this dungeon. This is the boss where shaving an extra 30 seconds off of it can save you the most hardship and reduce the chances of wiping in here by the most amount. And so yeah, definitely recommend doing that. Mist, I've recently added this week. Actually, I've started adding this route with skips, which this is a new development that you're going to start seeing, and that you're starting to see groups do in Mist, which says, you know what, these Tiernan villagers are really annoying packs, so we are going to skip them at the start. We don't need to hit 20% for a prideful threshold anymore. So in order to make this work, you need to invis pot, and then you need to actually hug a fairly tight line to make sure you don't get within the true sight range of either of these guys. But if you can do that, and maybe practice it for a bit on, go in there, practice it on M0, see if you can start learning the movement you need to make that work. Once you've got that, if you can get your whole group behind that, then that is a nice way to speed up the dungeon. Don't try this if the group is inexperienced. A lot of people will sometimes click on these with skip routes when really the no skips is going to be by far the better one for a lot of cases. So that's part of why I hesitate to even put this kind of route out there, because I feel like there are going to be people who, have a lot of trouble learning this one, but I can't really win, right? Because if I don't do this, then people are going to be like, oh, your routes are, they don't have the new best pulls, which this is certainly a good way to save time. So that's the dilemma. All right, Plaguefall. Watch out for bursting at the start. Don't pull all 20 of these. You will die. That's the biggest thing. Oh, actually, another thing that I've recently seen groups starting to do is pull Incinerator this week from up here before fighting Dr. Ickis, get an extra anima power for Ickis. So especially when the mob up here is something like Incinerator, this is a pretty powerful run, right? This is where you're getting your champion's brand, so a little bit extra number available there. Okay, Sanguine Depths. I don't really have too much specific for this dungeon this week. I'm trying to think. Can't think of anything. Let's move on. Spires of Ascension. Also don't really have too much to say here. This is kind of an annoying dungeon because you get your anima powers so late, right? You're doing all of this brutal trash without access to too much. One thing I would say is whether or not it's Tyrannical or Fortified, I think you should lust Klotos rather than Devos. Like, lust and use all cooldowns on Klotos, and don't try and use them on Devos. Because Devos, unless you're really tight on the timer, it's more time efficient to do it on Devos, but even then, it's only more time efficient by a tiny amount because she has those intermission phases anyway, so it really only is more time efficient on a key level that's high enough to actually get a good value out of Bloodlust before she goes up. And the Bloodlust on Klotos is just so much more life-saving, so would definitely recommend that in almost all cases. Necrotic Wake, a couple of Tormented notes. The kind of pathing through this first area has shifted a bit since Season 1. You're going to want to go left instead of right, generally. These packs are still good. You can still do a go right path, and it won't be the end of the world. The nice thing about going left is you get your anima power nice and early from Varuth, it looks like. Another thing about this dungeon is good weapon use. So the way that I would do this is this part here. Once Arcalath is at about like 30% health, someone, ideally the tank, should have the spear, a spear picked up from like over here, and throw it through Arcalath to pull the boss. It's good if it's the tank because they generate the threat. If it's not the tank, then the tank will have to taunt Amarth, and you're going to need to make sure then... That's why you want this thing to be at like 30% before you do it, is so that it just kills Arcalath, and then you're going right into boss. And because otherwise you might rip threat on both of them if you're not a tank and you're doing this. So your tank usually only has one taunt, so you're in grave danger if you do this as a DPS and this doesn't die from the first hit. So be cautious of that, and that's why I'd recommend the tank doing it. But that's a good way to speed up this little section here and get a head start onto the Amarth fight. Okay, Theater of Pain. I continue to recommend the strategy of grabbing this anima power and then doing a U-turn. That is good, and particularly this week, Varuth, it's nice to get access to. In most cases, it'll be necrotic wounding that your DPS are going to get out of this thing in this dungeon, and that is absolutely a powerhouse power to then go and take and use to help kill all the other tough single target moments in the rest of the dungeon. So I continue to recommend this, but a lot of groups will just go one wing and then another and then the third, and that's fine too. Not really a hugely wrong answer, but I do think this is fairly powerful, so I would recommend grabbing it. This week also, so yeah, Arcaleth is what MDT has here. I actually don't know. Just check. Yeah, so I think MDT is right. Sometimes they're wrong at the start of the season, but I'm pretty sure they're right about Arcaleth being here, which means you do want to pull it. When this is Oros, this is an easy way to skip Oros, but this is not that week. So I will stay tuned for next week's This Week in Mythic Plus, when I will talk about skipping Oros in this dungeon, because this is pretty tough with the last boss, but it's definitely a time save when Oros is over here. Anyways, hope this video helped. Hope you enjoy some fun keys this week. Get yourself some M+ score. Let me know how the routes are working out for you. Let me know how all the dungeons are going as well. If there's anything glaring that is wrong about my routes, definitely let me know as well. I try and keep them good, but inevitably some things get missed, so definitely appreciate it whenever anybody does send those over. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.